What if the hardest part of setting a boundary isn't actually setting that boundary? What if it's the moment after you set that boundary? When you receive the text, when you get a response, when the guilt sets in that you can't even put your phone down, when the second guessing starts, when the conversation ends yet it doesn't end in your mind, when the loneliness sets in, when you feel the pressure to explain yourself, that feeling that you feel like maybe you were too harsh, maybe you feel like you're selfish, or maybe you were too much. The doubt consumes your thoughts and you can't stop thinking about the conversations. Most conversations and boundaries stop at the moment you actually set the boundary. But no one talks about what happens after you set the boundary. When you're sitting in that aftermath, when you're sitting in that self-doubt, when you're sitting in the rumination of conversations and feeling like you need to explain yourself. I've had so many women come to me where they've said, I set the boundary, but why don't I feel better? Why am I still feeling this tension in my body? Why do I feel like I made a big mistake? And that's where the true work begins. And what I know is that boundaries are part of the equation, but where the real work is being able to feel safe enough to sit in them after you set them. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. Because if you've ever set a boundary and then immediately felt anxious or guilty or panicked or completely tempted to take it back, there is nothing wrong with you. You are not failing at boundaries. You're experiencing exactly what happens when old survival patterns begin to lose their grip. And that is precisely where the real work begins. If we haven't met before, I'm Dr. Kelly Kessler, a doctor of physical therapy and a transformation coach, and the host of the podcast, Rewiring Health. And this episode is where real change happens. This is where we're going to dive into the nervous system, the subconscious patterns, and the relational conditioning that keeps you stuck even when you already understand what's happening. If that's the conversation you've been looking for, you're in the right place. Now let's get into it. Let me start with a misconception that most people get stuck in the minute they start setting boundaries. They set the boundary and then they think that everything should automatically get better or should at least feel smoother or lighter. And when they set that boundary and they don't immediately experience that, or maybe don't even experience that months after, they feel like they're not working. I know that's the conversation around boundaries. There's no shortage of content telling you to set a boundary, highlighting areas you need to be protected, and showing the benefits of having boundaries. And while boundaries are absolutely essential, what's missing is the aftermath of those boundaries. Because the thing is, the minute you set those boundaries, it's not all sunshine and butterflies. That's where the real challenges can come in. And awareness of this is not enough. Having the right resources available to you in those boundaries is where you can actually hold them. The thing is, a boundary can take 30 seconds to communicate. Boundaries are pretty simple in the context of it, that you can communicate it and you can understand it intellectually. But the thing is that living it can take months. Allowing your body to feel safe in it, that's really where this starts to shift. The thing is, the conversation of a boundary is rarely the hard part. It's the aftermath. Because here's what no one tells you. Boundaries don't just change relationships, they challenge identities. They challenge conditioning. They challenge nervous system patterns that may have been keeping you safe for decades. When you stop being the easy one, the accommodating one, the one responsible for everyone else's emotions, the peacekeeper, the dependable one who never makes things difficult for anyone, your body often interprets that as a risk the minute you step out of those roles. And this is because they are unfamiliar. And your nervous system has been running the same program for maybe 20, 30, 40 years. So the minute you introduce anything new, anything unfamiliar, anything uncomfortable, it sees that as dangerous and that your identity is lost in the mix. And your nervous system is going to want to keep you back in the same patterns because they're predictable, because it's learned those, because it knows the outcome when you continue to live them. This is exactly the work I do with the women in self-loyalty mentorship. It's not in the 30 seconds to say the thing, but it's in the days, the weeks, the months after where you feel pulled back into those old patterns. And that's where the real transformation happens. This is the part I want you to really sit with in this moment. Most women set a boundary expecting relief, and instead they feel anxiety, guilt, doubt, rumination, hypervigilance, shame, loneliness, panic. Everything starts creeping up or erupting in that moment. And the story they tell themselves is, I must have done something wrong. If this was the right decision, why am I sitting in this? Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should walk it back and go back into what I knew. But what if those feelings aren't evidence that the boundary is wrong? What if they are evidence that the pattern is being challenged? Think about what you learned early on in your life. You may have grown up in an environment where being accepted required being easy, being agreeable, being responsible for how other people felt. You may have learned that conflict was dangerous or that disapproval meant that something was wrong with you, that your job was to smooth things over to keep the peace at whatever cost, and that keeping relationships was more important than keeping your own peace. And the thing is, you probably got really good at it. You probably got really good at observing the room, adapting yourself, shrinking what you actually wanted to say, or not really saying your truth just to make sure nobody was uncomfortable. And the thing is that you got so good that the pattern that ran it became invisible. Just the way things are the way things are, and that's all you knew. And it worked because likely there was some harmony that was created by you doing that. But at what cost to yourself? When you start to disrupt that pattern, your nervous system does not celebrate. Your nervous system starts to go back into that mode of protection. It sounds the alarm. It tells you that something is wrong. Because somewhere deep in the wiring of belonging and approval, it became synonymous with safety. And anything that threatens belonging, even if it's the healthy assertion of your own needs, gets flagged as danger. The alarm is what you're feeling after you set a boundary. And the thing is, this is not evidence that you did something wrong, even though it might feel like that. This is evidence that something real is shifting. I hear this inside self-loyalty mentorship every week. They come in thinking they failed because choosing themselves felt so uncomfortable. And what we work on together is helping them understand that the discomfort is not a signal of retreat. It's a signal that the old pattern is being asked to change. And the thing is, those two things are completely different. And learning to tell them apart is some of the most important work that you can do. This is where most people get stuck. And I want to name it precisely because it's so easy to miss. The boundary gets set, and then the pull begins. And you start feeling like maybe I should explain myself more. Maybe if I just say it a little differently, they will understand. And then you try to smooth things over. You feel the tension and you downplay the experience you had, or you downplay your truth. You question if you overreacted. You question if you should call or text or apologize for something you didn't even do wrong. And you start to wonder if you should just go back because everything seems to be tense. Everything seems to be a huge upheaval. And sometimes those moments just feel like too much to handle at that time. And the thing is that most of the time you're not returning because you genuinely changed your mind. That's the thing. It's not that you want to go back to those old patterns. It's because you just want the discomfort to stop. And that's really challenging. And it's also a very different thing. When you make decisions out of fear, it's never going to help you in the long run. Self-abandonment doesn't always look like saying yes when you mean no. Sometimes it looks like abandoning yourself to escape the guilt that follows saying no. You said the thing, you held the line, and then the discomfort came. And when it became too loud that it felt like you couldn't handle it, that's when you tend to go back and give in. And when that happens, when you smooth it over, when you apologize for saying something that did not require an apology, when you over explain until the other person feels comfortable again, you just made a withdrawal, a big one. And the message your nervous system receives is when things get uncomfortable, I have to leave myself to make sure the harmony is kept outside of myself. You go back. You make it okay for someone else. That is the cycle. And information alone doesn't break it. One of the first things we do in the self-loyalty mentorship is recognize the pull in real time, to feel it coming before you act on it. Because when you can name what's happening in your body in that moment and create that pause, in that pause, you have a choice. And that's where your real power resides. That pause is where self-loyalty gets built, one moment at a time. So if setting the boundary isn't the real work, then what is? The real work is learning how to stay with yourself after you set it. Can you remain connected to yourself even when someone's disappointed? Can you stay with yourself even when someone misunderstands your intentions? Can you remain present in your own experience even when they don't approve of it? Can uncertainty show up and you allow it to be there? That capacity to stay with yourself when every old pattern is asking you to leave yourself, that is what I call self-loyalty. It's not perfection. It's not rigidity. It's not becoming cold or closed off to people. It's allowing you to stay with you even in the hard moments. It's staying connected to yourself when the discomfort comes, when the guilt fires, when the second guessing starts. And when you feel pulled back into your old patterns, that you can stay strong and anchored in yourself. It's returning to yourself instead of returning to the pattern. And this is why so many intelligent, self-aware women stay stuck. They already know they need boundaries. They know they need to stop over-giving and over-explaining and absorbing everyone's emotions. The issue isn't knowledge, it's capacity. The nervous system has to develop the ability to stay present with the discomfort that follows change, to feel the guilt and not act on it, to feel the anxiety bubble up and not interpret it as evidence that you did something wrong, to sit with the uncertainty of someone else's disappointment without making it your responsibility to resolve it. Insight without embodied capacity rarely creates lasting transformation. And this is not a character flaw. This is physiology. This is neuroscience. Here's what I want to leave you with today. If you've been trying to change these patterns through willpower alone, through deciding to be different, through reading the right things, through understanding your childhood and your conditioning, and you still find yourself returning back to the same place after every attempt, I want you to hear this. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not someone who can't change. You are someone who is trying to solve a nervous system problem with a cognitive tool. And those two things require different approaches. The nervous system does not change through understanding alone. It changes through repeated new experiences that teach it slowly, cumulatively, that a different way of being is safe, that you can stay with yourself and still be okay, that the relationship can survive with your truth, that disapproval is not the same as abandonment, that you can feel the guilt and it doesn't have to run you. That learning happens in the body, in the real moments, in the pause before you respond to the text, in the breath you take before you smooth things over that didn't need smoothing, in the hand you put on your heart when the guilt arrives, and in the words you say to yourself, I'm here, I've got me. Small moments repeated over time. That is how the nervous system learns that self-loyalty is safe. This is not in theory, it's in practice. In the actual moments where the pull is the strongest and the old pattern is the loudest. If you've been circling this work for a long time and you're ready to stop circling and start moving, I'd love to have you inside Self-Loyalty Mentorship. The link to learn more is in the description below. And if you're just now recognizing yourself in this conversation, the place to start is my free self-abandonment audit. It will show you exactly which patterns are most active for you and what your first step towards self-loyalty actually looks like in practice. The link is also in the description. The thing is, the goal isn't just about simply setting boundaries. The goal is becoming the woman who no longer has to abandon herself to keep them. If this episode has landed for you, share it with someone who needs to see it and leave a comment in what has spoken to you. I'd love to hear from you, and thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you in the next one.